I caught my husband with my best friends, and everything I thought I knew about my life shattered in that moment. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. It was a normal Thursday evening. I had stayed late at work finishing a project I had been struggling with for weeks. I was tired but looking forward to a quiet night at home. Chicago was unusually cold that evening, and the streets glistened from the recent rain. My apartment building was quiet, except for the soft hum of the elevators. I opened the door to our apartment, expecting to see Ethan on the couch with his usual smile, maybe watching some late-night show. But the scene that met my eyes made me freeze in place. Ethan was not alone. My heart stopped when I saw Samantha and Jessica. My two best friends, the people I had trusted with every secret and every fear, were there, too, laughing and touching him in ways I could never imagine. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to run, but my body refused to move. I just stood there, staring. How could they do this? How could the people I loved the most betray me in such a cruel, careless way? I felt every emotion all at once: shock, rage, confusion, heartbreak. The betrayal was so deep that it felt like someone had punched me straight in the chest. Ethan finally noticed me, and the smile on his face made my stomach turn. He looked guilty for a split second, but then he tried to act casual, as if nothing had happened. Samantha and Jessica froze, too, and I could see their panic. The room felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were pressing down on me. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just witnessed. I wanted answers, but words failed me. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. I wanted to understand why him, why them, why all of this, but there was no explanation that could make sense of the betrayal. I felt my entire life, the people I loved and trusted, crumble in a single moment. All at once, a strange clarity began to rise inside me. Even in the midst of my heartbreak, I knew one thing: I couldn't let this destroy me. I had to stay calm, figure out my next steps, and take control of my life. It was going to be hard, and I didn't yet know how, but I refused to let this moment define me. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply walked out of the apartment, letting the door close behind me, carrying the weight of betrayal and the first spark of a plan. The next morning, I decided I couldn't ignore what I had seen. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I found Ethan in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had happened. My hands shook as I stepped closer, but my voice stayed steady. "Ethan, we need to talk," I said. He looked at me, a flash of guilt crossing his face, but he quickly replaced it with a practiced calm. "I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia," he said smoothly. "You must be imagining things. Maybe you're just stressed from work." My stomach dropped. Lies. Of course, lies. I felt a surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I lost control now, I would give them all the power. I couldn't do that. Then Sam and Jessica appeared from the living room, trying to explain themselves. "Olivia, it wasn't planned," Sam said, her voice shaky. "It just happened. You have to understand, we didn't mean for it to go this far." "Just happened?" I repeated in disbelief. "Do you even hear yourselves? You think this can be excused with a few words?" They avoided my gaze. Ethan tried to step in, speaking over them, but I tuned him out. I didn't need to hear his excuses. My mind was racing, taking note of every detail: the way they looked guilty, the way they stumbled over their words, the tiny slips that gave away their lies. I catalogued everything mentally, knowing it would be important later. Anger boiled inside me like a storm. I could feel it crawling up my throat, twisting my chest. Part of me wanted to yell, to hit something, to break everything in the room. But I didn't. I didn't because I realized that the real power wasn't in screaming, it was in patience. The power was in control, in planning, in making sure they couldn't hurt me again. I left the kitchen without another word, my heart pounding, my mind working faster than it ever had. They thought they could humiliate me, that they could break me with their betrayal, but they had no idea I was already thinking ahead. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible way to take back what they had stolen from me, my trust, my happiness, my peace of mind. I couldn't confront them recklessly. I had to wait for the right moment, the right strategy. I wanted them to see that I wasn't a person to be toyed with. The betrayal had shattered something in me, yes, but it had also lit a fire. A small, quiet spark at first, but growing stronger with every thought. I would not let them win. I would not let them think they could destroy me without consequences. And just like that, the first plan formed in my mind. I would take back control of my life, piece by piece, quietly but decisively. They had made the mistake of thinking I was broken, but the truth was, I was only getting started. After that morning, I realized I couldn't rely on memory or trust alone. I needed proof, clear, undeniable evidence that would show exactly what Ethan and my best friends had done. The anger I felt before turned into determination. This wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore, it was about taking control and making sure I wasn't taken advantage of again. I started paying attention to everything Ethan did. I noticed small things that had seemed normal before, extra phone notifications he tried to hide, late-night messages he quickly deleted, receipts for places he never mentioned visiting. Every small detail became a piece of the puzzle. I began saving messages secretly, taking pictures of receipts, and jotting down dates and times. I couldn't leave anything to chance. At work, I confided in my close friend and colleague, Megan. She had always been someone I could trust, and I explained enough to get her support without spilling every painful detail. Megan listened carefully, never judging, just offering advice and a steady presence. She reminded me to stay calm and think logically, and having her in my corner made the weight feel slightly lighter. I became meticulous. I watched Ethan's patterns, noting his comings and goings, his excuses, and the little things he didn't realize would be noticed. I checked my bank statements and bills, looking for anything unusual. Every time I found something suspicious, I saved it, knowing that one day it would all add up. It wasn't easy. Every discovery was painful, a reminder that the people I had trusted most had betrayed me. But the pain was also fueling me. It gave me focus. I wasn't just collecting evidence for revenge, I was collecting it for my own protection, for my dignity. I wanted to make sure that when the time came to confront them, there would be no doubt, no way for them to twist the story or deny what they had done. Slowly, I began to feel a change inside me. The heartbreak was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. It had been replaced with purpose. I could see a path forward, and I was determined to follow it. Each text saved, each receipt photographed, each note taken made me feel a little stronger, a little more in control. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to know that nothing could be dismissed. It was all real, all undeniable. And with that knowledge came a strange sense of relief. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was a strategist. I had the tools I needed, and I was ready to take the next step. The betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also made me sharper, more aware, and more determined than ever. I knew that this was just the beginning, and the person I was becoming would not be someone they could break again. After gathering all the evidence, I realized the next step wasn't to confront them right away. If I rushed, I might lose control, and everything I had worked for could slip away. So I decided to act normal, almost too normal. I smiled at Ethan in the mornings, joked with him, even asked about his day like nothing had happened. Sam and Jessica seemed to notice the change, but they couldn't read it. They grew careless, thinking I hadn't realized everything. Ethan started leaving the apartment without explanation, texting quickly when he came back, assuming I wouldn't notice. But I did notice. I saw everything. And I didn't react. Pretending to be oblivious was harder than anything I had done before. I had to keep my anger in check, my face calm, my voice light. Sometimes Ethan would lean close or make a casual remark about the past, expecting a reaction. I smiled, laughed lightly, and moved on. Each time, it reminded me how much power control could give me. Confrontation would have been loud, messy, and emotional. Control, on the other hand, was quiet and far more effective. At night, when the apartment was empty and the city outside quiet, I would sit with my notes and review everything I had collected. Every message, receipt, and small detail became part of a bigger picture. I started planning my next steps carefully, step by step, ensuring that when I finally made my move, nothing could go wrong. There were moments when I felt a flicker of sadness, remembering the trust one had once had. But those moments were brief. I replaced them with focus. I reminded myself that I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to shout or accuse. The people who had betrayed me would eventually see that I was no longer a victim. Ethan began to underestimate me, and that was exactly what I wanted. He thought I had no idea how much he had lied, how many boundaries he had crossed. Sam and Jessica, too, acted as if their betrayal had been forgiven. Their comfort made them careless, and carelessness would be their downfall. I felt a strange satisfaction in this quiet period. While they believed they had the upper hand, I was preparing for the moment when the truth would come crashing down. Every interaction, every word I spoke, was calculated to keep them unaware while I gained strength. By the end of the week, I realized something important: the calm before the storm wasn't empty, it was power. I was building it quietly, patiently, and I could feel the tension growing, not just in the apartment, but inside myself. I knew the confrontation was coming, and when it did, it would be nothing like what they expected. I wasn't just angry, I was ready. The storm was coming, but I would be the one controlling it. I knew that pretending everything was fine and gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed to protect myself legally and financially. One afternoon, I made an appointment with a lawyer, Laura Bennett, a highly recommended family law attorney. Meeting her was intimidating at first, but I quickly realized I was in the right place. I explained my situation carefully, without letting my emotions take over. Laura listened, taking notes, asking questions about assets, bank accounts, and property. She explained my rights, what steps I could take to ensure that Ethan wouldn't walk away with everything. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt a sense of control returning to me. I wasn't powerless anymore. We talked about divorce procedures, asset protection, and how to legally document Ethan's infidelity in a way that would strengthen my case. Laura reminded me that this wasn't about revenge in a reckless way, it was about ensuring fairness, protecting what was mine, and holding him accountable. I nodded, absorbing every word, and mentally making plans. After leaving Laura's office, I felt a mix of relief and energy. Relief because I knew there was a safe, structured way forward, and energy because I finally had a path. Every step I had taken to gather evidence now had a real purpose. I could use it to secure my life, my future, and my independence. I began reviewing my finances carefully. I checked bank accounts, credit cards, and investments, noting what was in my name and what was joint. I started organizing documents that could prove ownership and contributions, anything that could prevent Ethan from claiming more than he deserved. I wasn't obsessing, I was being strategic. Every small action built a shield around my life. This preparation gave me more than protection, it gave me power. I realized that for the first time since discovering the betrayal, I wasn't acting out of pain or anger. I was acting with purpose. I could plan my next steps calmly, knowing that when I confronted Ethan, I would not only be emotionally ready, but legally and financially secure. At home, I continued my outwardly normal behavior. I smiled, joked, and interacted as usual, but inside, my mind was sharp, calculating, and ready. Every detail I had collected, every move Ethan made, was part of a bigger picture I was building. I wasn't just preparing to confront him, I was preparing to reclaim everything he had tried to take from me. By the end of the week, I felt a quiet confidence that I hadn't felt in months. Betrayal had hurt me deeply, but it had also taught me resilience, focus, and strategy. I wasn't just surviving, I was planning to thrive, to take back control, and to make sure that Ethan and my so-called friends would face the consequences of their actions without me losing my dignity. For the first time, I understood something crucial: true power comes from preparation, patience, and knowing your worth. And I was ready to use it. By now, Ethan and my so-called best friends had started to act more relaxed around me. They thought I didn't know as much as I actually did, and that overconfidence was exactly what I needed. I decided it was time to test them, quietly and carefully, without giving away my hand. At home, I found moments to interact with Sam and Jessica, keeping my tone light, joking even, while observing everything. I noticed small tells, the way Sam rolled her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking, or how Jessica hesitated when mentioning Ethan's plans. Their arrogance was almost comical, but it also gave me a clear picture of their personalities. Careless, bold, and reckless. That carelessness would make my plan easier. Ethan, on the other hand, started acting differently. He glanced at me more often, asked questions he didn't need to ask, and hesitated when speaking about certain things. I could tell he was beginning to sense that I knew more than I was letting on. But I kept my expression calm, almost neutral, giving nothing away. Sometimes I smiled at him quietly, letting him wonder what was going through my mind. That smile alone seemed to unsettle him, and I couldn't help but feel a small, quiet satisfaction. Inside, my thoughts were sharp and focused. They think they're untouchable, but I've only just begun, I repeated to myself over and over. Every careless word they said, every false excuse Ethan made, was being stored in my mind. I was mentally organizing every piece, preparing for the day when the truth would come out. Even though I was calm on the outside, the tension in the apartment was growing. I could feel it in the air, the uncertainty, the guilt, the arrogance, and it made me more determined. I realized that power didn't have to be loud or dramatic. Quiet observation, careful planning, and patience were far stronger than any immediate confrontation. I was in control, and they didn't even know it. Sometimes, I caught Sam whispering to Jessica, glancing at me nervously, and I could see their fear starting to creep in. They didn't know I had collected evidence, that I had a plan, that I was already steps ahead. Every glance, every slip, only confirmed that I had the upper hand, even if they didn't realize it yet. At night, I reviewed my thoughts again, imagining how each step would unfold when the time came. I didn't need to rush, the tension itself was part of my strategy. By letting them feel secure, I ensured they would reveal even more of themselves before I struck. The quiet power I felt was intoxicating. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to betrayal, I was orchestrating a path forward. Ethan and my so-called friends thought they could manipulate me, control me, or intimidate me. They were wrong. And soon, they would find out just how wrong they had been. I was ready. The reckoning was coming, and this time I would not be the victim. I knew it was time. All the planning, all the patience, all the evidence I had collected, it was finally going to pay off. I decided the confrontation needed to be public, but not chaotic. A family gathering seemed perfect. Everyone would see the truth, and Ethan and my friends couldn't hide behind lies or excuses. The day arrived. I dressed carefully, not to show off, but to feel strong and in control. The apartment was filled with relatives chatting, laughing, and enjoying the food I had prepared. Ethan arrived with Sam and Jessica, smiling nervously as if everything was normal. But I could see the tension already creeping into their shoulders. When the right moment came, I asked everyone to gather in the living room. I held a folder in my hands, calm and steady, while my heart raced inside. Ethan looked at me suspiciously, clearly wondering what I was about to do. Sam and Jessica glanced at each other, uncertainty in their eyes. I have something I need to show you, I said, my voice steady. It's about things that happened behind my back, things that you thought I would never find out. I opened the folder and began laying out the evidence, messages, receipts, photographs, and notes I had taken over the weeks. Ethan's face went pale. Sam's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica tried to speak, but her voice faltered. The room grew quiet as everyone stared, trying to process what they were seeing. I stayed calm, composed, and in control, even as my chest burned with the betrayal I had endured. I trusted you, I said, looking Ethan directly in the eyes. I trusted you with my life, with my heart. And you, Sam and Jessica, you were my best friends. I shared everything with you, and yet, you chose to betray me. Everything you see here is proof. You can't lie your way out of this. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. No, you don't get to explain. No excuses. You made your choices, and now everyone can see them. You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I would stay silent. But I won't. I won't let anyone treat me like this again. I could see the shock and panic on their faces. The arrogance they had carried for weeks had completely disappeared. For a moment, it felt almost satisfying to watch them crumble while I stood tall. My anger, my hurt, and my heartbreak were all voiced aloud, and yet I remained poised. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I simply told the truth, and the truth spoke louder than any outburst ever could. In that moment, I felt a strange mix of relief and power. I had finally confronted them, and I had done it on my terms. No one could take that away from me. I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, and my life. And as the room held its silence, I knew the rest of the story, the part where I take back control, was about to begin. After the confrontation, I knew there was no going back. The trust that had been broken couldn't be repaired, and I didn't want to stay in a life built on lies. I filed for divorce, carefully following the advice Laura had given me. Every document was signed, every step taken to protect my finances and ensure that Ethan couldn't manipulate or control me. It felt empowering to take charge of my life in such a concrete way. Moving out was harder than I expected, but necessary. I packed my belongings slowly, taking only what I truly needed and valued. My new apartment was smaller but filled with sunlight and quiet. It didn't carry the weight of betrayal that the old apartment had, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. Each piece of furniture I set in place, each wall I decorated, was a symbol of starting over. Ethan's life, on the other hand, began to unravel. Friends and family who had once been on his side started asking questions, seeing his lies for what they were. Sam and Jessica faced their own shame, their careless arrogance had caught up with them, Some consequences were social, others legal, but I didn't have to chase any of it. Watching the results unfold without interfering gave me a quiet satisfaction I had never experienced before. I spent my days focusing on myself. I returned to old hobbies I had neglected, like painting and morning runs by the lake. I even started taking classes I had always wanted to try. Each day, I felt my confidence returning, my independence growing stronger. For the first time, I realized that my life didn't need anyone else to validate it. I had everything I needed to thrive on my own. Financially, I felt secure. Everything I had worked for was safe, and I no longer had to worry about Ethan misusing it. Handling my own money, making my own decisions, and living on my own terms gave me a freedom I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal had taught me lessons I wouldn't forget, but it also gave me the tools to rebuild myself into a stronger, wiser person. Even though the past still stung when I thought about it, I no longer carried the weight of anger every moment. I had turned that pain into determination and action, and it had changed me. Every step I took in my new life reminded me that I was no longer defined by the betrayal I had suffered. I was defined by how I responded to it. And as I looked out the window of my new apartment one evening, watching the city lights sparkle in the distance, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride in myself, and hope for the future. I had survived, I had reclaimed my life, and I was finally free. Once I had rebuilt my life, I realized it was time for a quiet kind of revenge. I didn't want to humiliate Ethan or my former friends with shouting or drama. I wanted them to see the consequences of their actions without me having to raise my voice. Subtlety, I decided, would be far more satisfying. I began by making sure Ethan faced accountability in his professional life. I shared evidence of his lies and manipulations with the necessary people at his workplace. I didn't exaggerate or attack him personally, I simply showed the facts. Within weeks, I noticed changes. His colleagues started treating him differently, and he could no longer rely on the smooth confidence he had always carried. I didn't gloat, but I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that truth had a way of making its mark. Next, I focused on reclaiming what he had tried to control. Shared investments, property, and accounts that had once been points of tension were now fully under my name or managed to ensure I had full access. Everything I had worked for, everything I had earned, was back where it belonged. I didn't have to fight loudly or create conflict. I simply acted with preparation and precision, and the results spoke for themselves. Sam and Jessica, too, faced their own consequences, though I never interfered directly. Their careless behavior, which had once seemed so bold, began to affect their social and professional circles. The arrogance they had carried was replaced by hesitation and embarrassment. Watching from a distance, I realized how much of their power came from me not knowing, and now that I did, their confidence had crumbled. Through it all, I learned something important: revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be dramatic. True satisfaction comes from taking back control, protecting yourself, and thriving while the people who hurt you realize they no longer have any power over your life. Every time I made a financial decision, took a step forward in my career, or simply enjoyed a peaceful evening in my new apartment, I was proving that their betrayal could not touch me. I found myself smiling quietly, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I finally felt free. I had survived the lies, the deceit, and the heartbreak, and now I was living a life they could never take away. My happiness, independence, and confidence were all forms of quiet victory. By the end, it was clear to me, the best revenge isn't anger, confrontation, or making someone suffer. It's living your best life while they watch, powerless to affect it. And that is exactly what I did. Every day, I thrived, I laughed, I moved forward. The people who had tried to control me had no place in my world anymore. I had won, not by fighting them loudly, but by winning my own life back, fully and completely. After everything that had happened, I finally had time to reflect on my journey. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the lies, they had all been devastating, but they had also shaped me into someone stronger, wiser, and more determined. I realized that the worst moments of my life had taught me lessons I would never forget, and they had given me the strength to take control of my own happiness. I started focusing on the people I wanted in my life, friends and relationships built on trust, honesty, and respect. I nurtured these connections carefully, learning to value quality over quantity. Meeting new people and strengthening old friendships reminded me that I could trust again, but on my own terms. I no longer needed anyone who had caused me pain or disrespected me. Ethan, Sam, and Jessica slowly faded from my life. There was no drama, no shouting matches, no desperate attempts at reconciliation. Their absence was quiet, almost invisible, but it was powerful. It showed me that victory didn't have to be loud. Simply living my life fully, confidently, and independently was the strongest statement I could make. I didn't need to gloat or retaliate further, they had already lost their place in my world. Every day, I felt my dignity returning. I made decisions for myself, followed my own goals, and enjoyed the freedom that came from no longer being tied to people who had hurt me. I learned to trust my instincts and to rely on my own judgment. The empowerment I felt wasn't fleeting, it was built on the foundation of everything I had endured and overcome. I also noticed a shift in how I viewed myself. I had once defined myself through the lens of others, the husband who betrayed me, the friends who lied, the people who underestimated me. Now, I defined myself through my own actions, choices, and resilience. I realized that true strength comes from within and that no one else could take that away from me. Looking back, I understood that the betrayal, painful as it was, had been a turning point. It forced me to confront my own boundaries, to demand respect, and to refuse to settle for anything less than I deserved. Every tear, every sleepless night, and every moment of doubt had led me to this place of clarity and confidence. And so, I moved forward, not with anger, but with quiet confidence. My life was mine again. I had reclaimed myself, my dignity, and my future. The people who had once held power over me now watched from a distance, powerless, while I built a life filled with trust, happiness, and self-respect. In the end, the strongest revenge, the deepest healing, and the greatest victory all came from one simple truth: I chose myself, and that choice made me unstoppable.